Hello everyone, Fran here at New Testament Explained. This video is the third out of 4 in a series on Anthology 1 if you are studying New Testament studies as part of the Edexcel A-Level Religious Studies course. As always, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and let's go. So the third passage we look at as part of Matthew's birth narrative and as part of Anthology 1 is the escape to Egypt. Now, this is the third time that we will see Matthew use proof texts in his birth narrative. And interestingly, this passage actually has 2 proof texts within it. Remember, if you've not seen the last 2 videos, a proof text is an Old Testament reference, and it is used in this context to prove that Jesus is the Messiah. In this section, the emphasis is on the Exodus and Moses, and we get quite a lot of contemporary events when Jesus is born that seem to parallel what happened in Exodus. So, as always with these passages for Anthology 1, the blue highlight is any proof text, and yellow are other areas of this passages that are quite interesting. I'm going to actually start with the yellow this time. It makes more sense to start there. So Raymond D. Brown has argued that this Bible passage has been set up in a way that it echoes the story of Moses. So in this passage we get Herod give orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem. We get Joseph taking Jesus and Mary in the middle of the night to Egypt until the death of Herod, and that can be seen as a story that parallels the story of Moses. So in the story of Moses, we get that the Pharaoh gives orders to kill all the male children of Hebrew slaves, and so Moses is put in the basket down the river, where he is eventually taken in by the Pharaoh's daughter, actually. And therefore, what Raymond D. Brown thinks is that Matthew is trying to portray Jesus as a second Moses. Now, in terms of the blue highlight, the proof text, there are 2 in this Bible passage, and the first reads, "And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son." Now, this can be seen as a parallel to Hosea 11:1, which reads, "When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son." And therefore, what links we've got here between the Old Testament and the birth narrative is the idea that God had called Israel out of Egypt. Eventually he'll get called out of Egypt when this is all over, but also that, more importantly, Joseph has taken Jesus to Egypt for safety. In terms of the second proof text, we get, "Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more." That parallels with Jeremiah, but more specifically, chapter 31, verse 15, that reads, "A voice is heard in Ramah, mourning and great weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because there are no more." Now, in terms of analysing this passage, again, I mentioned this in the first video, that prophecies, i.e. these Old Testament statements, can generally be analysed in 2 ways. One is a preterist interpretation, and that is where you say the Old Testament passage is talking about something that happened at that time. A futurist interpretation is different, because what you say if you think a prophecy is a futurist interpretation is you say, whilst it is written in the Old Testament, it is talking about a point in the future. It is not talking about something that happened there and then, but is sort of alluding to something that will happen in the future. Now, in terms of how a preterist would read Jeremiah 31:15, they would see Rachel as weeping for the Jews in exile in Babylon, or perhaps the children who were killed as part of the Pharaoh's order. But some people would say the tears might also be considered joyful, because eventually the exiled Jews will be returned to their homeland. However, a futurist interpretation of this is that actually Rachel weeping is representing the mothers of Bethlehem who are weeping for their children murdered by Herod. So it's a reference to something that will happen in the future. And that the tears of joy here might be seen as the Messiah, Jesus, surviving and ultimately returning home from Egypt. What you can say here, if you don't know which side to take, whether it's a preterist interpretation or a futurist interpretation, is you can say it's a double prophecy. And what that means is the prophecy has two layers. It is talking about birth, something that happened at the time, and also something that will happen in the future. So the idea of double meaning two meanings, something that happened in the present, in BCE, before Common Era, but also could be talking about something in the future. That then is the end of the video on the escape to Egypt. There is one more video that will complete this series on Anthology 1, so make sure you watch that, and as always, subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you.